And just like that, we are live. Welcome, everybody, to the very first episode of the Voice of Season podcast, where we talk about all things sports, that being breaking news, developing stories, film analysis, and we have much more content that we want to bring to you guys on any given episode. Today's slate of topics that we're going to be talking about today is the NFL games of the week here in week 11, games that stood out to me and the games that I want to talk about. We also have the Kaepernick workout situation to discuss. And everything that transpired with that. We also want to touch on the MVP race. I want to break down each and every candidate and where they stand as of right now and who I think can win it at the end of the season. Without further ado, I am your host, Austin Alexander, and this is the Voice of Season podcast. Hit it! First game I want to talk about is the Chiefs-Chargers game, Monday Night Football. It's a divisional game, prime time. Those usually come down to the wire. This one was no different. It did not disappoint. Final score was 24-17. The Chargers fall to the Chiefs in final seconds of the game. I truly do believe the Chargers did everything they needed to do to win this game, especially on the defensive side. They just could not close. They could not force overtime. Phillip Rivers had the ball with the opportunity to do so, and he just couldn't execute. And that's been the Chargers' downfall for the majority of the season. And in many seasons prior to, they lose all these close games. They have an issue with closing. And, well, I'll be honest with you, throwing 4 interceptions through the course of the game, 2 in the first half, on back-to-back drives. I mean, that does not help. That's not a formula to win games at all. You can't throw 2 interceptions on back-to-back drives. I understand the first one, you get hit, and it just so happens to fall into a defensive lineman's hands. We'll chalk that up. But the second drive, you throw an interception to Tyrann Mathieu, who reads you like a book. He read the play well, and he picks you off. You can't have that happen from your veteran quarterback, especially one with the stature of Phillip Rivers and a team who has playoff hopes as the Chargers do. And with a team who has playoff hopes coming into a Monday Night Football game against a divisional rival, that's a must-win game. And I believe it was the game the Chargers had to lose. But let's give credit to the Chiefs. The Chiefs, for what the Chiefs usually accomplish, I will say I believe they struggled in the first half. Patrick Mahomes altogether did not look as good as he usually does. The Chiefs offense, they started clicking more so in the second half, which is why I said the Chargers had many opportunities to pull away from the Chiefs. I believe a lot of those opportunities came in the first half that they just could not capitalize on. However, that gave the Chiefs an opportunity to get it together, especially coming out of the halftime, and start clicking. And that they did. We saw the Chiefs offense kind of, I'm trying to stay away from get it together because we did not get a game that we expect out of Patrick Mahomes. He had less than 200 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. But altogether, it looked as though most of the success came from the second half. Another game that I want to talk about is the Broncos-Vikings game. The Broncos-Vikings, that game was a tale of two halves. It really was. The Broncos-Vikings game, another team that is desperate to revive their season with a win, and that being the Denver Broncos coming in at 3-6. It was tough. It was tough for the Denver Broncos in the second half, especially after doing everything they needed to do in the first half, putting up 20 points and holding the Vikings to 0, and outscoring the Vikings on the road at half. That's setting you up for victory. That's setting you up for an impressive win and a turnaround for your season. However, the Denver Broncos just could not maintain that momentum, and that's been a problem for the Denver Broncos. And I will say, I want to compare the Denver Broncos and the Minnesota Vikings in a sense that these have been two teams that have been in the past been better than what their records have suggested. I believe that it is just turning around for the Vikings a little bit quicker than it is for the Broncos. However, I do believe the Broncos are also better than what their record suggests right now. And I think the Vikings underestimated that. And it shows in the first half. The Vikings just couldn't get anything going. At that point, they're even turning the ball over with fumbles like it was nothing. The Vikings offense just looked lost out there, and even their defense couldn't stop the Denver Broncos offense, who showed that they really had nothing to lose. However, that coin most certainly flipped in the second half. The Denver Broncos were only able to put up 3 points in the third quarter and got outscored 0-20 in the fourth. That's just not a formula to win many games, especially games in which you need to win in order to get your season turned around. However, give credit to the Vikings. The Vikings put up quite a fight in the second half, which led them to the victory. Especially that fourth quarter rally, the Denver Broncos had absolutely no answers for Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings. All in all, I think Brandon Allen looked good. He finished with below 50% of his pass completions, which is not good enough. You need to see your quarterback complete more passes. He needs to get the ball moving a little bit more in the offense. However, all in all, I don't believe any moment was too big for him. Even in the final drive, the last seconds of the game, the pass to Noah Fant was very much so catchable. If he catches that ball, we have a different game. We have a different outlook on this game, and even possibly the season for the Denver Broncos. However, he did not. But I will not take that away from what Brendan Allen was able to accomplish. I don't believe we have seen enough to say Drew Lock should come in, at least not yet. I believe the upcoming games are going to be a big telltale sign for the Denver Broncos and what they should do at the quarterback position. As of right now, I do believe they should perhaps stay with Brendan Allen, ride it out then until they are completely ready to turn the torch over to Drew Lock and see what he's made out of. I do believe that we will see Drew Lock at some point in time this season, but as of right now, I think it's best for the franchise as a whole to keep Brandon Allen in, because as I said before, he did not look bad his first game, nor did he look bad this game. Now, of course, for you to win games, you need to be better. I'm not saying he's not the issue. I'm not saying his play wasn't a problem. I'm saying he did not look bad for this game. Another outlook is for this Broncos-Vikings game. The Broncos' run game also looked good. This offense does look good at times. It just cannot be consistent. And the Vikings offense has also had those struggles, more so earlier on than in the season. Now that the Vikings have started to get it rolling, Kirk Cousins has settled in as the quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings. I believe that we won't see those woes so much for the Vikings side. However, for the Broncos, it just continues week in and week out. The Broncos have yet to really put an entire 4 quarters of sustainable offense and defense all at once. And that's been the biggest thing holding them back. As a matter of fact, this is about the 4th loss, I want to say. The Broncos have suffered in the final minutes of the game. And even if the defense can, or the team as a whole, because as a matter of fact, this time the offense couldn't pull out. If the team as a whole can pull out 2 of those games, this entire season looks different. And that's why every game matters. And for the Denver Broncos, the game that mattered the most for their season so far, they just couldn't pull it away. It's another tough loss for teams. I mean, for the Chargers and for the Broncos, these are 2 teams who are not out of the conversation yet for the playoffs. However, at this point, they might as well be. The playoff race is starting to shape up, and teams like that cannot afford to lose. However, for the next game that I want to talk about is the 49ers and Cardinals game. Once again, I won't say this game was a nail-biter. However, this game did come down to the wire. It was back and forth, I should say. I won't say it came down to a wire. It was a back and forth game. And I believe this was Jimmy Garoppolo's coming out party. Um, Many people were waiting for this kind of Jimmy Garoppolo game, myself included. We needed to see a game in which Jimmy Garoppolo went off. We needed to see a game in which Jimmy Garoppolo put up the stats that he did, and we need to see a game in which Jimmy Garoppolo put the offense on his back, because we've seen what Jimmy G could do with the weapons that he had earlier on. With George Kittle struggling early on in the season, he did not have Emmanuel Sanders until just later on in the season when they finally traded for him. But Jimmy Garoppolo was looked at as not the main factor for the San Francisco's 49ers success. And I believe that is the case. I do believe this is the offense, or this is the defensive team, and the defense is the reason why the team has had the success that they have had. However, that does not mean we should discredit the offense. The offense is just fine. The offense has been doing what they needed to do, and Jimmy Garoppolo has been doing what he has been needed to do. Here, this game, he showed that he can do more, and if needed to, he can lead this offense into a shootout. He can lead this offense into a high-scoring game, and you want to see that before heading into the playoffs. You want to see those kind of results before going into games that really start to matter, games that can affect seeding, or games that can have you eliminated for the season. You don't want any of that kind of stuff to kind of be up in the air. We'll find out when it happens. You want to see this kind of stuff from your quarterback that you're especially paying all that money to have a little bit more trust heading into more important games of the season. And I believe we did. This was also, once again, San Francisco's game to lose. And give credit to the Cardinals, however. They did not quit fighting. They did not stop. The Cardinals offense is really starting to gel, I believe. Heading into the season, I was very skeptical of the Cardinals, especially for that offense. I did not understand why they got rid of Josh Rosen so early. I personally did not believe it was Josh Rosen's fault for the offensive struggles for the Cardinals last year. However, after seeing the route that this offense is going with Kyler Murray, I believe they really might be onto something. However, like I said, I believe they really could have just built around Josh Rosen and have also found success, though they have their quarterback of the future now. They have Kyler Murray, and they can now build around him to make an even better offense that can suit the route that they want to go even better. And that's really showing for the Cardinals offense. The run game, as far as it goes for David Johnson, I think he's starting to really get phased out of this offense, which is tough to say. Personally, he was one of my favorite players back in 2017, especially when he blew up. However, I think injuries and talent at the position as a whole for the league, even the top running backs can be walking on thin ice. And I don't think it shows any better than with David Johnson and the Arizona Cardinals. It's tough to watch. It really is. I think he's still very, very much so talented. I don't think he's out of the team's game plan at all. I think he needs to kind of start to get the ball rolling again, and that's what's going to get the Cardinals offensive coordinator to start incorporating him into drives a little bit more again, and for him to get to that bell cow back status. But as of right now, the offense is rolling and the offense is clicking, so I have no issues with the Cardinals doing what they have to do to score points, because at the end of the day, you can have whatever kind of success with the stats. If you're not putting up points, if you're not translating that into touchdowns or field goals, you're going to struggle. You're going to struggle winning games. You're going to be struggling even staying in games, as a matter of fact, and you'll continue to have those high draft picks at the end of the season. So altogether, both offenses showed a lot. They proved a lot. However, there's an issue with Arizona's defense. I think fundamentally, there's just an issue with Arizona's defense. They just don't have the talent yet. They don't have the personnel. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing that keeps them out of games moving forward. And until that is fixed, until that is addressed, we will continue to see the Cardinals. Um, we'll continue to see the Cardinals impress offensively, however, disappoint defensively. And until they get that straight, they will kind of still be looked at as a subpar team. However, if they can keep this offensive success moving forward and then fix the defense, the Cardinals can be a team that can make some noise heading on into future seasons, especially if Kyler Murray can continue to get better and better. Sky's the limit for this team. However, going back to the 49ers side, an outlook for a future, teams need to start game planning a little bit more for Garoppolo. Not to say that they haven't, but the defense has always been a focus for the 49ers. And the team is 9-1 for a reason. I really do believe that Jimmy Garoppolo is still one of the main factors why the 49ers have the success that they have this season. As a matter of fact, the 49ers are 8-0 this season when Jimmy Garoppolo throws 275 more yards in any given game. So that goes to show you that if you put Jimmy Garoppolo in those situations, he can pull out a victory, and he showed it this last Sunday. Next, I think it's important to talk about the whole Kaepernick workout situation and everything that transpired with that. It was not as cut and dry as we thought it would be heading into Saturday, with Kaepernick showing up to the Atlanta Falcons Stadium, working out as the NFL scheduled, with all 25 teams who promised to be there actually attending. No, as a matter of fact, the day of, Kaepernick canceled the workout and scheduled it about an hour away to like some high school stadium. And only about 8 teams being able to show up. So the whole thing with that is both sides had their agendas, both sides had their reasonings for doing things the way they did. The NFL wanted the workout to be behind closed doors and offered Kaepernick to sign a unusual liability waiver, to which Kaepernick's team declined, as well as the fact that they wanted the workout to be broadcasted. They wanted the workout to be as transparent as possible. So Kaepernick chose his own location, in which any NFL team that was still interested would be welcome to join. To which, like I said, 8 teams were able to. The whole problem with this was a problem with both sides having their own reputations to protect. The NFL wanted it to be behind closed doors, and Kaepernick had an issue with that. As a matter of fact, it was about probably the biggest reason why Kaepernick rescheduled the workout, because like I said, he wanted to be as transparent as possible. Kaepernick did not want any chance the NFL had of getting a hold of this tape that's not released to anyone else, getting a hold of the workout, cutting out all the good parts, and then showing it to the public stating, see, this is why we haven't signed you yet. And Kaepernick thought that would be a more than a possibility. He thought that that could actually transpire. And the NFL, on the other hand, says, hey, this is what we do. We don't want outside media filming our workouts, our procedures, what we're doing. This is supposed to be private. This is where we scheduled it. This is the terms that we agreed to. You either show up or you don't. And well, we saw what Kaepernick's decision was. Now, like I said, Cap thought this was an issue of trust. I see where both sides coming from. I do see where Kaepernick is coming from in this situation. The NFL would have all leverage, all possibilities, and controlling the narrative, and that's exactly what Kaepernick didn't want. Kaepernick took the stance of, let me get the truth out there with my workout, as opposed to what the best shot would be, which is me going to this closed doors workout. and running the risk of my reputation being bashed by the NFL. And the NFL wanted to cover themselves with the waiver, saying that, hey, if you don't get signed, you can't sue us. You can't sue us again. So both sides had legitimate claims in this situation. The issue is both sides also kind of mismanaged this situation. Kaepernick showed that he still has the talent, still has the arm strength. I don't believe that was ever really an issue in this situation. I believe the biggest thing that the NFL wanted to see is if Kaepernick would, for lack of better terms, submit to the NFL terms and conditions for what they're trying to do and how they're trying to get Kaepernick back in, to which Kaepernick didn't. And I think that's going to be another death sentence in which Kaepernick won't be getting into the league anytime soon. I don't think anybody even questioned whether or not Kaepernick was still good enough talent-wise. They wanted to see how defiant Kaepernick still was. And again, this is my personal take on it. Let me preface that. As a matter of fact, I don't want anybody taking this as, oh, this is facts. This is clearly what the NFL was doing. No, this is my take on it. I think that wasn't at all the huge overlying issue or the whole kind of thing that the NFL was trying to see. I think they did want to see whether or not Kaepernick still had it. However, I do think the one of the biggest things that they wanted to accomplish with this workout was to see if Cap would sign the waiver, to see if Kaepernick would show up to a workout behind closed doors where outside media wouldn't be able to show the public. And if Cap could trust the NFL in a sense where, hey, we have the power to kind of change the narrative, but will we won't, and you kind of just have to trust us. And that's the whole thing that the NFL was kind of trying to get Kaepernick to do was, hey man, just trust us. And after everything that kind of transpired with this whole event with Kaepernick and the NFL, with the lawsuits, the whole blackballing thing, you're asking a lot out of someone to, with that history with the company, with that history with the organization, to just trust you blindly like that. I think Kaepernick really had a legitimate reason to want to have the workouts broadcasted, workouts live streamed, have the workout out to the public is what I should say. But all in all, I think there was no progress that was made, really. I think this did not hurt Kaepernick's chances to get back into the NFL, but it most certainly did not help it. All in all, if anything, this whole thing was just a big sidestep. I don't think this. Many people thought this was the NFL's way of just trying to do a PR stunt, trying to show the public that they're still giving Kaepernick a chance. I don't believe that was the case. If that was the case, I don't think all the teams would really show up. And as a matter of fact, I really don't believe the 8 teams that showed up after Kaepernick moved the workout would have shown up at all, because if that was the case, if they were just trying to do a PR stunt to say, hey, we're giving Cap a shot, but Cap isn't good enough, something like that, Cap personally moving the workout would have been all that they needed to say, hey, we're done. That's it. But 8 teams still decided to show up, which meant I believe that was a filter tactic to eliminate many teams that may not have really been interested or may have actually been doing it for a PR stunt, to actually to weed out those teams and then show the teams that were actually interested. And of course, there were teams that legitimately couldn't make it because of the fact that they that it didn't align with their schedules. However, the fact that 8 teams still showed even after the whole canceling of the workout situation, I believe that does show as a term of actual interest in Kaepernick. Now, that can also be a situation in which they're still trying to save face, like, hey, we even showed up even after you canceled the workout. That's always a possibility, but like I said, they had the perfect opportunity to wash their hands, like, hey, we're done. Like, you moved the workout, you canceled it. We were giving you a shot, and you still moved it. Like, if teams really weren't interested in Colin Kaepernick, that was their perfect opportunity to say no. And the end result might still be the same. It still might be a no, but not for the reasons that many kind of conspiracy theorists thought before. I think this was truly an instance where both sides just mismanaged the situation, and it's tough. It's really tough to watch this whole thing get played out. You can't expect Kaepernick to drop his morals to play for the NFL. I don't think we'll see that. I think what we saw here was two sides not backing down in a situation that could have easily gone smoothly. Like, if both sides compromise, if Kaepernick goes to this workout, but the NFL does allow public does allow the public to see the tapes, to see the film and everything, I think we're looking at a totally different situation. However, both sides with their deals are going to stand their ground, and this is what we got. Here, this part into the podcast, I want to take a break, and when we come back, we are going to discuss the MVP race between Russell Wilson, Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson. I'll even throw Dak Prescott in there. Yes. So we have that to look forward into. But first, a break. And we are back. Yes. Probably with less viewers after I said Dak Prescott should be in the MVP conversation. But let me explain. I've seen all the memes. I've seen all the jokes online. And yeah, it's fun to make fun of the Cowboys or whatever. But at some point, we just got to give credit where credit is due. I mean, Dak Prescott is having a remarkable season. And I can't take anything away from him at that point. And let me be clear, though. I personally do not believe he's a front runner by any means. I believe that comes down to two players that we'll discuss here shortly. But I do believe Dak Prescott should be mentioned in the MVP conversation. I personally believe Dak Prescott should be mentioned in the MVP conversation. An honorable mention, if you will. But getting into this, I will break down each candidate that I personally think has a legitimate shot at winning MVP. And we'll start out with quarterback Russell Wilson of the Seattle Seahawks. Russell Wilson is having a remarkable season as well. I mean, this is outstanding of what Russell Wilson is able to accomplish. 23 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, over 2,700 passing yards. Russell Wilson is taking care of the football like no other quarterback in the NFL currently. He is making plays. He can hang with just about any of them. Russell Wilson, I personally believe, is the best quarterback in the NFL currently. And the stats are showing. Now, Russell Wilson has always kind of done this, okay? He, take it 2 seasons back when he accounted for like 97% of Seattle's total touchdowns. That's insane. I believe he should have won MVP that year. Of course, it went to Tom Brady. The year after, Russell Wilson kind of had I don't want to say down year. However, Seattle was way more run heavy than they are this year, which shows because Russell Wilson's starting to pick it up again. But altogether, nonetheless, Russell Wilson is getting the job done week in and week out. I believe he's one of the most consistent quarterbacks in the NFL. I believe he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and that's why he deserves to be in the MVP conversation. Next up is quarterback Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens. Now, we all know why Lamar Jackson is being considered an MVP candidate. He's not just a running back, folks. He really isn't. I mean, he last year, again, it's fun to make jokes, this, that, and the third, but like I said, we got to give credit where credit is due. And Lamar Jackson is putting up even good quarterback numbers. I mean, 19 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 2,200 passing yards, more than that even. I mean, he's getting the job done through the air. And I'll get into his ground yards in a second, but I have to preface this. I mean, that's only 4 touchdowns less, 3 more interceptions, and 500 passing yards less than Russell Wilson. And 500 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, and 3 less interceptions. That's like a game. That's one game difference between Lamar Jackson and Russell Wilson. However, we all also know what what Lamar Jackson is able to accomplish on the ground. Lamar Jackson currently has 788 rushing yards on the ground, as opposed to also taking up 115 attempts so far into the season. 788 rushing yards. That's more than some teams. He's well on pace to 1,000 rushing yards for a quarterback in one season. Again, like I keep saying it, we have to give credit where credit is due. A lot of people like to discredit Lamar Jackson in the MVP race, saying the only thing that he has over Russell Wilson is the rushing stats, which is true. However, that cannot discredit him from this conversation. There's a lot to go. There's a lot that goes into the MVP race. We know team success has a lot to do with it. We know overall stats have a lot to do with it. We also know that it's like how a player plays has a lot to do with it. What kind of effect does he have on the field? It's not just about stats. It's not just about the team's record, but it's that it factor. Who has that it factor? I personally believe Lamar Jackson has that it factor over any other candidate on this list. It's including Russell Wilson, especially over Russell Wilson. And that's saying a lot, because Russell Wilson, like I said, is probably the most safe quarterback, the most consistent quarterback in the NFL currently, especially with this season. But Lamar Jackson just has that it factor, man. He can take over a game, he can take over a drive, and he can get you out of some jams as far as whether the pocket's closing in. He sees a lane, he's taking it, and he has the legs to take it. That the 788 rushing yards in only 11 weeks in the NFL season, that shows for it. And that's why I also believe that Lamar Jackson is the MVP frontrunner in the MVP frontrunner for this season. The next person I want to talk about is, of course, Deshaun Jackson. Now, Deshaun Jackson falls third on this list for me. If you want to know, I am ranking it in order. For me, it's Russell Wilson first, Lamar Jackson second, which, real quick, that is a 1A, 1B thing, okay? Neither or has the advantage, at least for my list. But Deshaun Jackson is the first kind of two, okay? He's third on this list, but 1A, 1B, 2. But I'm not taking anything at all away from Deshaun Watson. I believe he is an MVP candidate for a reason. And when you are an MVP candidate, you have just as much of a shot to win MVP going forward as the other two. We just haven't seen that game from Deshaun Watson. Lamar Jackson has had multiple MVP moments. Russell Wilson has had multiple MVP moments. His biggest being his on-the-road victory against the then undefeated 49ers. However, and I know Deshaun Watson has had a bunch of big games. However, I personally do not believe he's had his MVP moment yet. And I believe that's one of the biggest things that's holding him back from the MVP conversation. Unfortunately, I believe he had a shot to have that MVP moment against the current MVP frontrunner, Lamar Jackson. However, he could not get that done. As a matter of fact, it was a blowout. So he's had more MVP moments taken away from him than he's had this season, and I think that's what's stopping Deshaun Watson from being more involved in the conversation. Because let's be real. People throw Deshaun Watson into the conversation. However, for a lot of people, it comes down to Russell Wilson, Lamar Jackson. Those are the two. No one really talks about Deshaun being the front runner. But the stats do show 2,600 passing yards, 18 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. So he's just right up there with everyone else. But like I said, the lack of MVP moments, the lack of MVP games is stopping him from getting further into that conversation, which, like I said, this is a intangible aspect to kind of take into to the equation when talking about who should win MVP. Of course, on paper, it comes down to stats, team record, how well is the player performing, but we can't deny that the it factor does incorporate into a player's ability to win the awards. And we just have not seen that from Deshaun Watson yet. Now, each of these players have had their MVP games, so I don't want to completely discredit Deshaun Watson from standing out from the competition. Week 3 against Oakland, 279 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. That was a great game for Deshaun Watson. We've also seen him against New Orleans, another 3 touchdown game, 1 interception with 268 passing yards. And I said he doesn't have as many MVP moments as the other two. I didn't say he didn't have any. We haven't seen that moment yet, but we have seen some moments. The game that I think really put him in the conversation to begin with, not as a front runner, but to put him in the conversation, was his game against Atlanta. 426 passing yards, 5 touchdowns with a perfect passer rating, 158.3. That game not only put Deshaun Watson in the MVP conversation over any other quarterback that was just teetering that, but I mean, at that point in time, before I believe Russell Wilson and Lamar Jackson started to really pull away, I think that really put him as one of the front runners. Because, of course, we can dissect Atlanta's defense. I can do a film analysis on that if need be. But just based off of that game, yeah, Atlanta's defense does tend to struggle week in and week out for not every season, but currently this season and in recent history, Atlanta's defense isn't anything to really write home about. But that being said, not every day a quarterback throws 426 passing yards and 5 touchdowns. That was Deshaun Watson's MVP moment. We need to see more of that if he wants to win MVP this season. Those are my 3 candidates. Like I said, I think Dak Prescott should be an honorable mention. Realistically, I'm not making jokes either. I really believe Dak Prescott should be an honorable mention in the MVP conversation. But those are my 3 candidates. Those are my reasons why. And please do let me know if you disagree. But all things considered, I believe all 3, and even 4 if Dak Prescott really starts to turn up later on in the season, all 3 have a legitimate shot at winning MVP. And that's about all I have for today's episode. I've covered about all the topics that I wanted to cover. And I certainly had a blast making this episode, especially since it's the first episode of the Voice of Season podcast. I'm so excited to start this journey with everybody. So, I mean, if you enjoyed the video, all I really ask from you is to simply tell your friends. Subscribe, follow whatever platform that you're listening to this on. Just share the video. Help me get the content out. Help me grow, because what I want to do is grow a passionate community of sports fans that like to talk and like to get their opinion out there. And I can't do that without you guys. So thank you for everything so far. Let's continue to grow, and I'll see you all in the next episode.